Hello and welcome to Making Revenue Tech, our Masterclass Edition. I'm joined by a master of his craft, Shane Jamison. How you doing, Shane?
I'm doing well, Richard. Thanks for having me. This is exciting.
I'm excited. We've known each other for quite a long time on LinkedIn, and we've had a few wonderful conversations. We know some of the same people, which is so strange considering how far apart in the world that we are. And one of the last conversations we had, I particularly enjoyed because we spoke about intrapreneurs and why it's so important that in early stage businesses, which we both love, that people understand that if you're going to go and hire people to lead your sales team, they better be entrepreneurial. And so before we kind of like really get into this topic and pull it apart and twist it around and really try and make sense of it for people, why is this topic of intrapreneurs important to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I believe that those characteristics of an entrepreneur and having someone like that within your company is key, not just for early stage companies, but I think for larger companies as well. And it's one of the areas that even larger stage companies that are maybe more mature start to fail because they just check the boxes on the list.
Hmm.
And that's when we're working with earlier stage companies, that's really difficult to do because everything's up in the air. You have an idea, but there is not a set in stone plan that you follow. And so it's so important to have someone that has the same qualities of an entrepreneur that make you as a founder a successful entrepreneur, right? Passion for the product, ambition, curiosity, creativity, and really a willingness to solve a problem, a deep problem. And so having that within a company is as the North Star for this person is key because you don't have all the resources, so you have to have someone that is resourceful, and that creativity component is real key to that ambition component to make something that hasn't been done before is really key. And so often the mistakes happen when you hire someone that checks all the boxes, looks good on paper, but they may have had all the resources prior, but they don't have the resourcefulness to make things work when it's not a clear blueprint.
I love that. It's so important, isn't it? I think people get wowed by resources. Look at what this person achieved in Salesforce, for example. They grew from 100 to 300 million, and you're going, that was a massive team effort.
Yes.
Everything that went into that level of achievement, or people that talk about, I closed a 3 million deal. And it's like, I closed a 3 million deal. It's like, how many people were involved in
Oh
that
goodness, right.
project, right? It's crazy. Like when you talk about resources, let's try and get that really clear in people's minds, because I think it's probably quite a good differentiation, particularly because we think entrepreneurs are really resourceful. What are the kind of resources that big enterprise sales leaders have that startup salespeople do not have?
Well, you have all the technology and the automation and all the tools that can make you that are good to have. Um, and this is one of the areas that we've seen, I think, a shift, and companies are starting to scale back on their tools, right? Over the last 4 years, you had all the call recording, you had the most, every widget you could have in the CRM, all the different automation tools like the note-taking tools. And what's happened is these the salespeople are often overwhelmed with as many tools as they have. So it's really paring it back to what matters. And I think what you need is just a phone. You need a list of people to call and to reach out to. And then you need to, I think the other piece is just recording to make sure that you can review that. So if you have those elements in place, you can be good at sales. We've strayed so far from the fundamentals and the foundation that you're just seeing it start to collapse on itself. And people are more, intrigued by the new shiny object than they are in just doing the right things. So when you have well worn processes that we know these work, and then you have all the tools and everything you need to make that work, when that's stripped away, that can be very unsettling, right? Like all of a sudden you're not on stable ground anymore. And the truth is you just need the basics. And a lot of these other tools, which can be really useful, but are often more of a distraction than they are effective.
Yeah, it's true, isn't it? It's like we all get it, right? The amount of inbound messages that we get from businesses trying to sell us technology to automate things and, do everything on autopilot. It just like assumes that the fundamental way that you're doing it is correct. Otherwise, if you're going to try and automate something that isn't working already, you're just scaling failure. Right.
Exactly. Well, I think there's, in some of these, when we automate things that are, or elements to a process that are done manually, a lot of times you're not factoring in kind of the what's lost in doing that.
Mm.
Which, for instance, like automatic note takers, what's lost is most people never look at their notes again. It goes into the CRM or it's stored, and then it's just this digital hoarding that we have for all this information that we've gathered. And there's something very effective, for writing something down and having a pen and paper and taking notes, not transcribing, but taking notes of the elements that stick out and what's really important about that. And that's makes it sticky.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember as like a lead gen rep back in 2007, I would always start my sheet of paper with spin, like written like SPIN.
Yes.
And I was going to make sure that on that conversation that I would make sure I'm going to go and ask questions around those things. And then I'll be honest with you, Shane, I band qualified. So we banned. But it was 2007, right?
It's okay. Yeah, it was okay then.
That was still the thing. But like I remember writing down spin and then band on the page, and then in that conversation you're writing down the answers. And then don't get me wrong, it absolutely sucked to then go and turn that write up into a CRM update and then post that lead. I hated doing that. I remember very vividly going to our manager, like me and a couple of the other guys on the team who were like top performers, because we were amazing, right? And we put a business case forward for them to hire an administrator to write up our leads.
Yes.
But I guarantee that the actual process of writing down the spin, particularly, meant that whilst I was really engaged in the conversation, I knew that there was parts of the conversation I had to go and explore further. And whilst my write-up probably wasn't the most accurate thing in the world, because once you've only got a few keywords from the conversation, your CRM update's not going to be particularly good. That, like you say, the process of actually physically writing things down, it means that you are sticking to a little bit of a script, if you will, in terms of there are some key things I need to understand about this person to understand if they qualify. And I should put them through to the sales team, who then should go and work on them and spend their time on it. Do you think that, like, when you're working with, like, let's say businesses, do you still see that? Are people still writing it down, or is it all just going straight into CRM? Or is
it's all just going straight into the CRM through the note taker. And I think it's at the detriment of results for sure.
Yeah.
There is, having somewhat of a script, or in this, like using spin or bant, it helps you know what to look for. I can sit on a call and have a great conversation with someone and think that we become best friends. But if I didn't pull the relevant information out, then it's useless, and you're not going to move the deal forward, right? And so often that doesn't happen. And so having those elements that you're looking for primes your brain to be ready for that, for when it happens. We don't want to necessarily be like looking for them. When salespeople, often we get happy years, right? We start to ask these questions, and then they're just like nailing it as far as like, as we're qualifying, everything they're saying is like perfect. And then we just want to get those happy years and tell them how we're going to solve those problems.
Yeah.
And especially in that beginning phase, the discovery phase, or even setting the meeting phase, you're looking to gather the information as broad as possible, so that when we do get into the evaluation, we can narrow down on what matters and sort through the noise and the distractions. So much of sales isn't about just gathering the information. What it's about is providing clarity to the prospect and the buyer. There's only 3% of your total addressable market that's ready to buy at that moment in time, right? We know that. If you're depending on that, you're probably not going to hit your number unless you just have a way to gather 100% of that 3%, right? Sure. And that's really difficult to do. So with those people that know what they want, they know the problem that they have an idea of how they want to solve it, or they've tried to solve it in the past. The sales process is more about initially just solving that problem and helping them articulate the solution to that problem through creating it. For the rest of the people that aren't in that position, we have to surface the problem, because most often they just show up to you with this idea that things aren't right. And I've tried some things, but I don't know what it is. So first, let's articulate what that problem is. You do that not by telling them, but by asking the questions and helping them articulate clearly what that is. Once we have that, now we can start to move through the process to solve the problem and co-create a solution with them.
It makes a lot of sense. It's interesting because obviously salespeople get a bad rep in this marketplace, right? Like the ones who were successful in 2020, 2021, they're basically just order takers. They're not going to be successful in this market. You need to be really good at selling. But I was speaking to a fractional CRO called Mike over in Massachusetts, brilliant guy. And he was telling me that he believes that a massive problem in the market today is that it was kind of like, seen as you needed 3 times pipeline coverage. And then it became 4. And a lot of companies are saying you need 5 times pipeline coverage. And he's going, that's a massive problem. Imagine that this was a factory, a manufacturing process. You're buying all this raw material, which is like your marketing stuff that's going in and your sales outreach. And then the yield that you're going to get is 20%. So there's 80% waste as part of that sales process. So a lot of stuff gets put into the pipeline because they've identified pain. But people don't buy because of pain. Everyone lives with pain. Like we will live with pain every single day. But we have to often
stay with the devil,
Exactly right. And you have to have some kind of health scare to go to the doctor, or you're immobilized, or someone kicks your ass and you've got to go and fix the problem. So unless someone's actually they've decided that they have to do something about this problem, we work in sales, not miracles, right? It's not like we can just go do you want to go and improve your workforce efficiency? Everyone's like, yeah, of course, yeah. But it's are you literally churning 60% of your customers right now? Have you just lost a third of your sales team? Is that 80% of your revenue coming from one account, and that's at risk? There's something that's really going on. So when I talk about this theory that Mike had, which I absolutely loved the way he articulated it, which is people don't buy pain. You said 3% of your TAM are ready to buy. When I'm talking about all these sorts of numbers and these ideas, what comes to your mind?
I think there's a couple things going back to what you're talking about pipeline coverage. We haven't nailed down often what's effective for actually closing deals and helping people. And so what we do is we say, hey, let's add more pipeline to this. And then it's just a numbers game. There's definitely numbers, and you should know your numbers, whether you're in business or sales, either one. However, what happens is if we haven't nailed down and we're not practicing the skills to make that effective, and we're just not maximizing these conversations and opportunities that we have, you just get pipeline bloat, really, which is people just stuffing things in the pipeline to get their leader off their back and make it look good. And this is especially true in larger companies. I see it more and more where they just have a bunch of deals that should not be deals. And if they can't, I think that's, often the salesperson sees the pain, but the buyer hasn't really felt the pain, and they can't clearly articulate that pain. So if you can't first identify what that problem is, that just exacerbates the rest of it. And we're so quick to hear the words that we want to, that is our marketing copy that knows, oh, I can solve that. And then we just jump into that solution. We never go deeper and really connecting that for that person. So with sales, my goal is not to get them to say yes. It's to help them make a decision. And that can be a yes or a no. What do they need to make a decision? They need clarity. What do they need to gain clarity? They need relevant information. How do you give them relevant information? You understand what their problems are and what they're looking for. With understanding the problems, giving them the relevant information, providing clarity, they can take action, and that action can be a yes or a no.
Yeah, I love that. It's really, it's so interesting. These fundamentals are definitely missing in the market. And we've all had those cold calls, right? Where someone phones us and they, I think we're probably the sort of people that would take a cold call, right? The sales leaders who don't take cold calls.
I'm probably the easiest person to sell, because if you're good, I'm like, yeah, I want to talk more. This is great.
Yeah, I want to hire them.
Exactly.
So many times I get a good cold call, and then I start asking them some questions, and then I convert them into candidates. Why would you not, right? They obviously they had to be unhappy, but so many times you get a bad one, and it's they ask you a question or two, and obviously the really bad ones you probably wouldn't speak to, but the ones who go, they ask you a question, you say yes, and then they go, fantastic. What I'm going to do is get someone in contact with you.
Right.
You're
Right.
like, what? Hold on. Like, even if I said yes to that, and this rep's going to celebrate, they're going to color in their box, maybe they get a bonus. That I am never going to go onto that follow-up call with the
Right.
salesperson, right? But if that rep's incentivized to do that, and marketing then think that they've done a really good job because I came through marketing, so they're already happy. But sales are going, none of these people are even turning up for calls, let alone remembering the call. Definitely not buying anything. Like, this is obviously this is a classic old problem. This disconnect between like generating demand from marketing and then converting it through to sales. Is it as relevant as ever?
Oh, totally. I definitely think it is. I mean, people want to do, in general, people are going to do the easy thing, right? There's that saying, no one gets fired for hiring McKinsey. It's like a well-worn path. You can say, well, I checked all the boxes. To
Yeah.
me, that's a sure way to fail, right? That's how you set up a mediocre company and a mediocre culture. And it really has to go back to being able to read between the lines and go levels deeper, because that's where your prospect is not going. We have a problem, and this is humans. We have a problem. We start thinking about that problem, and then when it gets hard solving that problem, we go back to the beginning, and now we're stuck on a loop. And so sales is about breaking that loop and helping them go levels deeper so that they can actually make progress and not just stay in this same motion. How do you do that? You motivate them to take action, right? And we know that there's two ways to motivate people. That is people that want to achieve, or that is fear of something bad happening, right? We know that people have, it's the loss aversion theory that people are 2 times more likely to be motivated by fear than they are towards achievement, right? I feel worse losing $1 than I feel good gaining $2. So understanding that and being willing to work with them to break that pattern and have the fortitude to continue when you hear the right things, to go and dive deeper and ask second and third level questions to really understand and help them clearly articulate what they're needing done.
Yeah, love that. So for anyone who doesn't already have the pleasure of knowing you, Shane, you're talking from all this rich experience about sales coaching, right? And about like really getting into the science and the art of sales. Tell us a bit about who you are and the types of businesses you've made a career out of helping.
Sure. So 20 plus years career in sales. And, when most kids wanted to be an athlete, a football star or basketball star, I enjoyed those things, but I always imagined myself being a businessman. And as I stepped out into the world and was ready to start my career, my main motivation was, as a businessman, that means making money. And I need to make money. Well, what's the fastest way I can make good money? And that is in sales. So that's where I started my career, moving from individual contributor to VP of sales, helping companies grow from 1 to 30 million in revenue, to working with companies to grow 50 to 250 million in revenue and IPOs. And what I found is, especially as I grew into bigger roles at bigger companies, is that often their sales process was built on a house of cards. And so we start wanting to move up market, and that's when things start to break. And it's not a clear process. And so if you don't have a clear process and system, you're not going to be able to scale effectively. You might be able to bring in revenue, but again, sooner or later, you're going to get out over your skis and you're going to start tumbling. And as I started to wind down my corporate career, during that time, I was always working with startups and working with salespeople to coach them and make them better and give them advice. I started to realize, like, the foundation is where that needs to be set early on so that we don't get to this point. And it's not as much about the tactics and the processes that you use. It's about continuing to fortify that foundation over time, and as you add new things, because we get too far away from that, and that's where things start to fall apart. And so that's where my focus has really been, on working with early stage companies. And there's 2 elements to this. One is working with early stage companies that maybe a first time sales leader or early stage sales leader or a founder, especially like technical founders that are looking to transition to a sales led organization. And really helping them build the foundation that starts with changing and reframing the mindset of what sales is.
Sure.
Right. So we start there, and most people think it is about being the silver tongued pitch man that can sell water to a well. And the truth is, sales is really about guiding someone and being the guide on someone else's journeys. They're helping them become the hero that they're meant to be by avoiding failure and achieving success. With that as the foundation, now we can start to actually help people, and we're not just doing it for us. And what's funny, and I found in my life and my career, is that when you focus on others, good things happen to you.
Sure. Interesting. I really like this, because if you think about it, like your main motivation when you first started was to make money. Right?
Make
and
bank,
then, like,
bro.
You were good at it, and then you got given the opportunity to develop into leadership roles. And I'm sure we could do a whole podcast on like mistakes that you made as you went through the journey. But then you found like this passion around earlier stage. You found this passion around working with technical founders to do the stuff that they find really complicated, and fundamentally realize that if you're bringing a bunch of salespeople into an organization who are driven by a desire to get money, to get benefit and get reward, then the person that you're speaking to is just like a part of your story. They're just something, like, whether they can add value to you or not. Whereas you're reframing it fundamentally to be, my job is to understand the journey that someone's on, where they are today, what they can't do, what they're trying to get, and then if I can offer them the right solution. So you're enabling people to be heroes of their own story, which I really, really like. But I would imagine a lot of founders, the ones who are unsuccessful, start a business because they want to make money. Right.
Yeah.
It's like their biggest driver is, how do we make loads of money? And they're probably the ones that go like, let's do drop shipping. Let's go and take someone else's product and let's just find a way to go and do it. But the technical founders that we're talking about here aren't driven by those things. They're driven by trying to change the world. They're driven by trying to, like, they're so frustrated with the way that technology is, the problem's not been fixed. There's this massive gaping hole that they can find a way to go and solve. So when you're talking about this technical founders that you've built these relationships with and really helped to grow their sales organizations, what are those motivations that that are fundamental for the reason why they've even created those businesses in the first place?
That's a great question. I think there's a couple of things. Whatever your spark is, if it is to make money, if it is to become something, I think that's important. That is ambition. And I think that's a key element to any successful founder, is to have that ambition to create something from nothing, to become greater than what you are right now.
Yeah.
Part of that is that it's when the money or that spark becomes the North Star. That's where you run into the issues, because once that engine started, it's not about the ignition anymore. It's about all the other processes that are happening, right? And so that's where we want to lean into those. And that's why it's important to reframe that mindset around sales, because that's going to allow you to learn and make this more than a transactional relationship. And so when you're looking for those technical founders, or those founders that are successful, it's going beyond that ambition, but really understanding that passion for solving that problem. A desire to deeply understand who they're helping, right? This isn't about you and what you can do. It's about them and what they can be. And if we understand who they are, that's really important. That's going to lead into other characteristics that are really important, like creativity. People want to associate creativity with art, and there's certainly an element of that, but it happens in business as well. It especially happens in sales. And that's because creativity happens from constraints, right? If I just tell someone to go paint something, whatever they want, maybe it's something good, but that's really overwhelming. But within those constraints, you have your limits, and your job with creativity is connect the dots, make the connection between other parts and bring that into the situation. So we say, like, think outside the box, right? So that's what creativity is about. Clearly identifying the problem and finding a unique path to solving that problem. And that's where, going back to hiring people that have those same qualities you look for in an entrepreneur, especially in early stage, that's so important. Not to feel threatened by those qualities. And I think that's where a lot of technical founders will become intimidated, if you will, or overwhelmed, because they're like, well, that's a slick talking sales guy that's got these entrepreneurial qualities. Is he going to try to come in and take over what I built, right?
Yeah.
And we have to be willing to embrace that, because those same qualities that make you a successful entrepreneur are going to make for a great first sales leader. And so again, it's ambition, it is creativity, it is that deep desire for curiosity and willingness to learn that's going to make someone in that role successful. Bringing in a first-time sales leader that has all the answers in a startup, that's pretty scary to me, because they think that they know, and the truth is you don't. There's going to be things that happen that you've never done before, and if you can't use creativity and that curiosity to learn and how to work past it, then you're going to be stuck.
True, yeah. If someone coming in and going like, "Here's how you should be," here's what we should do, before they've like spent the time to really understand who you're even trying to help, like what are the challenges that they're going to be facing today, why what we do helps them to do that better than the alternatives, and where it doesn't.
Right.
So we can make sure we qualify out, and then bringing a load of people who really believe in that sort of stuff. It's interesting because you talk about, obviously, the entrepreneur, the technical founder, has this desire to go and solve a challenge and help people, right? It's fundamental to what they've looked to build, but they're absolutely wanting to go and get a bunch of results out of the business, right? They're not just doing it as a philanthropy effort. There's a missionary and a mercenary element to all of these people. But I would imagine if they are scared of hiring someone who's quite entrepreneurial and is going to come in with a bunch of curiosity, not be afraid to challenge, not be afraid to bring creativity into the way that they solve things. Maybe that means actually fundamentally changing some of the elements of the product and the positioning and the messaging and all these sorts of things, which the founder might have this wonderful story to articulate, but you try and translate that down into 1 rep, 2 rep, 3 reps, just doesn't scale. They don't have the same background and network and all those sorts of things. I would imagine that one of the major failing points within startups, and we've seen this a number of times, it'd be really interesting to get your experience, would be hiring someone who like totally thinks the same as the founder. It's like a bit of a yes man who can be like, yes, we're going to go and do these things. Yes, for sure. We can do that. We can do this. We can do that. Rather than someone who's going to be thinking much more like it was their own business. And if you wanted to hire someone to be a bit of a tell them what to do and they're going to go and act, in a small business, there's so much room for that to fail. And if it's always coming back to the founder as like the expert, the sort of all-seeing, all-powerful thing, then I can't imagine that business would scale very much. What's your view on that?
I totally agree. It becomes a choke point, and you're going to reach a limit. Everything works until it doesn't, right? And so you have to be able to, and what we know in a startup is that we don't have 10 years of 20 years of something working. It can happen very quickly. And so someone that's just looking to you as the founder to give them all the answers and tell them what to do, those people work great in large companies that need to execute on a blueprint. With early stage companies, I think it's really important that that person, again, has that entrepreneurial characteristics. And, part of it is as a founder, you are a leader. And whether you like it or not, you're selling. You may not be wanting to run the sales process and sell the product. You're selling your team on the vision of what you're trying to accomplish and how you think we're going to accomplish that. How do we get people to buy into that? How do we get them to become motivated without, they're not going to have the same passion as us. If I thought of this idea and I'm building and I want to make something great, they're going to have like hopefully 80% of that same passion. There was, even 50% of that same passion. So we have to find ways to motivate people. And how do you do that? One, you connect them with a purpose greater than themselves, right? So they're accomplishing more than just, I need a paycheck, right? Second piece to that is that you give them an opportunity to master their craft. And that is the growth element to it, right? We want to attract them, retain them, because they want to grow, not just within the company, but grow their career and grow their craft. And so we need to enable that and give them a way to push themselves, stepping outside of that comfort zone, what we know works, to try different things. And so that we can learn, review, and then continue to iterate on that process. And then the last piece to motivation is autonomy, right? They need to be given an initiative, something to take charge of, and then how they go about doing that is up to them. If you're not giving them that, then you've created a factory worker and you're just going to get what you've always gotten. So those
Sure.
three elements to motivation is really key for a founder to understand and know that we're always tweaking and balancing that out and making sure that, hey, everyone's connected to the purpose. Hey, there is a way for them to get better at their craft and grow their career and their skill set. And then that they feel like they have a agency in how they show up and how they accomplish that task.
That's a brilliant way of articulating it, because otherwise they'd just all start their own businesses, right? It's one of the key things
Right.
for me that differentiates an intrapreneur is they actually prefer to be part of a tribe, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you think about like the very early humans, we all lived in tribes. It's not that like each family was its own tribe,
Mm-hmm.
which is like the way that society's built now. Is like you look after your family. Most important thing, you work for your family. It's your biggest purpose. Everyone's like, I work for my kids. And it's like, yeah, it's true. But we've lost that kind of like tribal community, and good companies bring that together. And we've lost a lot of that trust in this market because, we could be like feeling like we're part of the family, the tribe, the community. And then boom, suddenly we're not needed anymore because we had a bad quarter or because the company made the wrong decision or because the market changed or something. We don't have that same kind of security. But we need to feel like that. And most people have that gene. It's quite different for someone to be this entrepreneur or tribe leader who wants to go out alone, risk it all, face almost certain failure. But you get these people who go, actually, I do want that kind of excitement. I'm in a tribe that's so big that I don't really have a say.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have impact. I don't have the chance to be creative. I feel like I'm being stuck and locked down by process. Whereas in a earlier stage tribe, I will get the chance to go and do a bit of exploring and play different roles. And probably this tribe's going to become bigger. And that means that I'm going to have the opportunity to grow and to bring other people into it. It's like quite an exciting proposition, but you're really small. You don't have the same resources. It's going to be hard work and you might fail. It takes a special kind of person. But I guess from just understanding sort of basic human psychology, one of the major drivers for someone to be an entrepreneur, and if you take your example, you worked in larger businesses up to IPO 250 million. You wanted to come back into early stage. So if we take you as the example, what are those fundamental drivers that mean that you're attracted to early stage businesses and younger tribes?
There is for me, it's really about the build, right? It's like, I like that creation process. And there is, when we think about entrepreneurs hiring other entrepreneurial mindset people, one of the key elements of that is them really understanding what their strengths are. You are going to have to wear different hats, and that variety is really exciting. It's something that drives me, is because like, oh, I didn't know about this. I'm interested in this. But we always have to be able to go back to our superpowers, right? What are we really great at? Because that's what's going to have the biggest impact. And that's why technical founders, it's so important at a certain point to bring in that first sales hire, because your superpower is likely not sales. And at a certain point, that tends to take over everything else you do. And so we all have to have that eagerness to curiosity about learning something new and being able to put on a different hat. We can't let that distract from what our superpower is and what our focus is. And that's where I think that's the most difficult thing to manage within a startup, is that it's really easy to get distracted by all the other shiny objects and other things that you can learn. But really, one of the reasons why I like working with them is because it's about taking this chaos and getting rid of the noise and finding that clarity.
Sure.
Until you run into that chaos again. And then you're going to have to repeat the process. Everyone thinks that it's like, oh, we figured it out and now it's just a straight line up. We know that's not true. It's going to happen again. So that's why it's important to understand the elements of that process so we know what works, what doesn't, and we can review. So working with salespeople, it's about preparation, practice, execution, and review. Right? Most people miss that review part. They go preparation, practice, execution. Well, a lot of people miss the preparation and practice part too. But and then if it works or it doesn't, and then they go back to doing the same thing. And so we take it for granted that and that's, again, it goes back to the characteristics you're looking for, like curiosity and creativity. So That's really what it comes down to, is understanding your strengths, focusing on those strengths, but being the willingness to learn and put on different hats, not just because now that's going to be your focus, but that's going to further strengthen your superpowers because you have a
Mm,
deeper understanding of how it connects and the impact it makes.
really interesting. This whole review piece and preparation piece is fascinating. It makes me think of sports. So if you take NFL, for example, if you're watching the video, you can see I'm a Miami Dolphins fan. You know, don't want to talk about that too loudly in public right now. But they play like what, once a week, right? For what, 18 weeks in a season.
Right.
So it's not very much of the year. But they're spending so much time in preparation for the season and then preparation for every game. They're watching a load of tape of the competition, of themselves. There's so much time in preparation, practice, and review for a very small amount of execution. But in business, it's like in a lot of businesses, probably 95% execution. They might be actually, they're probably 30% meetings.
Right. Yeah.
30% admin, 30% execution. But it's not like, we're really sitting down and discussing the preparation that we're going to do for that day. We're not going to go and listen back to calls. We're not going to go and really understand this successful customer story and have products and customer success and everything, and tell us why it was so wonderful and how we fixed their problems and all those sorts of things. Why do you think that business doesn't prioritize preparation, practice, and review like high performing sports teams?
Because we want to skip to the good part, right? We want the numbers and we want to close the deals, and that's what's exciting. But if that's what you're focused on, you might get lucky, right? But that's what you're depending on, is luck to make this work. And I think it's such an apt analogy, and we always use sports for sales organizations. I think it's true of every organization should take that same approach. And I love that you pointed out that the execution part is really just like a small aspect of it, but the weeks and hours and days they put into the preparation and the practice is what makes for successful execution. There's something very interesting about when we step out into the world and we step out into our careers. We go through, if you're in school, your coaches are kind of like teachers, right? They're teaching you and guiding you along the way. If you're in sports, you've got those coaches. And then all of a sudden we step out of that element. We don't need coaches anymore. We don't need someone to look at this. Yet 90% of Fortune 500 CEOs credit their success to outside coaches and mentors, right? And it really is about building a culture of coaching, and that is how you build a culture of results. So you see these successful football teams, right? We look at the Patriots, probably the greatest dynasty there is, and definitely had the greatest. And I'm not a Patriots fan, so that hurts to say. But it wasn't about the wins. It was just about, they followed the process. When people showed up, they knew it was about business. And Tom Brady and Bill Belichick weren't there to make friends and make you feel good. We were there to win a championship.
Yeah.
And so they had the steps in place in order to do that. They showed up and knew exactly what they needed to do and how they needed to practice. They prepared through that all week, getting hands-on, right? Running the plays over and over and over again. So they're simulating real life situations as much as possible, knowing that's going to introduce variables, and then they can see what works and what doesn't. And so when you get into the game, everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth, right?
Sure.
So if you've not practiced those different scenarios, how are you going to react? If it's not a straight line and you get thrown off course, you're going to fail. And so having that in place, building the processes and systems to enable that preparation and practice is where most sales leaders miss out, because especially in a startup, there's going to be a point where the demand is great, like things are working and it's going really well. And so you're just on these calls over and over again. And the first thing that's going to fall off is that preparation and practice. If you don't have a system set up to effectively do that and prioritize that, you're going to run into severe challenges, right? You're going to reach a limit and become overwhelmed. And then again, it starts to crumble. It's like if Bill Belichick, to use that example, shows up at practice on Monday, throws a playbook down and says, all right, guys, I'll see you on Sunday. Like, you can't expect that they're going to win games that way, right? We've got to do that work. And that work is what gives you more opportunity to execute, right? It
Yeah.
increases your surface area of luck and brings greater opportunities because you're prepared for those. You're prepared to take advantage of that situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would imagine that in a lot of startups, certainly when we're speaking to founders and they're looking to go and hire, entrepreneurial sales leaders and ICs, they're not saying, yeah, this is 100% inbound role.
Right. Right.
It might be it's 100% outbound. It's a 360 role. It might be, yeah, we're expecting like 30% of the pipeline come from inbound, and very little is focused on the quality of that versus the ICP and the conversion rates through to closed and won. It's just kind of numbers people throw about. But you don't have the brand name. There probably isn't the investment in marketing going into creating this warm flow of people that you can pitch to all day and refine your message. You're going to go and have to hunt. So until that stage where their growth sort of marketing and engine means that there is sufficient noise and demand in the market so they can really go and scale, what are those fundamental problems that you're building for? So when let's say you go into an organization, you've got a technical founder, you come in as the sales VP. You've got maybe a rec to go and build your first sales team, maybe let's say 6 people. And you've got maybe 10% of stuff that they need to go and hit their target coming through from inbound. Talk me through the build that you're going to do to get that team ready to actually deliver some results.
Right. We're going to get down to the real fundamentals. What you find with technical founders is that often, if it's inbound, they want to bring in someone for sales to run that inbound because they're overwhelmed by just the amount and it's taking away from the business. If it's not inbound and it's something that they've been going outbound, what happens, they want to bring in someone from sales because they exhaust their network and the people that their friends and network, right? The people they were getting these conversations through. And then how do I attract someone that's completely cold? And early on, those technical founders, if you're doing the selling, the buyer is often buying because of you, not because of your product. It's because they see your passion. They believe in you. When you start going to people that don't know you, that's not going to happen. You're going to get a lot more rejection. And so if we're going to bring in a sales leader, we want to make sure we understand, okay, who is our ICP? Like clearly define our ideal customer profile, because in startups, it doesn't have to be set in stone, but we need to get very specific so we understand who we're talking to. From there, you go into your buyer personas, like not only who is buying this product, but who is this product impacting within the company. So like having 3 levels of buyer personas, right? Understanding at the user level, maybe the manager, director level, and then like the executive level, how is this connecting to them? Then we're going into building our value prop. And so what often happens in these early companies is that they're just going out and doing this, but they haven't clearly defined what these things are. They haven't documented what these things are.
Sure.
And so that's going to be the first thing, is make sure we have the ICP, the buyer persona, the value prop. Now we can start focusing on the messaging and how we craft a message that resonates with what's driving our buyers. Then we can get into the cadences and the sequences and how we run the process and the questions that we ask on these conversations and build it out from there. But really those first four things are key to understanding that. Once you define that, you document it. Now we know what good looks like. I can't tell you how many entrepreneurs and founders and salespeople that one of the first questions I ask when I start working with them is like, what are your numbers? And I intentionally leave it vague to see what they come back with. And most of them will say, well, our target is this, and we're at 50% to target. Okay, so how do you get there? And they're like, I don't know. What do you mean? Well, I mean, let's do some basic sales math. Like how much outreach are you doing to get how many meetings, to get how many discovery calls that convert to how many demos that convert to how many proposals being sent that convert to how many closed ones. And when you don't do that, it's often, you're never going to figure out what good looks like, especially at each step of the process. So once we have defined and documented those first 4 elements, then it is really understanding what those numbers are. And then that now it's not just this is what it is, but that now informs us to go back and further define and iterate and document what the good looks like.
Yeah.
And now we have something that when we bring someone else on, We're not saying, hey, listen to a few calls and start calling these people, anyone buys our product in this business, so go ahead and call anyone. No, they know, they have a plan to be able to execute,
Yeah,
and they know what's working and what's not. And if we know our numbers, I'm able to then go into that review piece. Like, we'll prep and we'll practice for that. And then we'll listen to those calls and understand, like, oh, you're not converting very highly from discovery to demo to that next stage. Why is that? Let's go back to that discovery. What I found is that most people think they have a closing problem, and in truth, they have a discovery problem. They never get down to the root problem. They don't ask the right questions. They just ask the questions that's going to get the answers they want to hear.
sure. That's
And
a
then now you're
brilliant
just trying to
differentiator.
manipulate the buyer into saying yes.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, right. That's amazing.
Yep.
I love that. Because what it makes me think of is when you're talking about all that stuff, and it's so focused around, like, we really understand who we can help. We understand them, their businesses, their market, their challenges. We understand the people within that company and what they care about and how this affects them and what they might be struggling with today. We're then crafting this super relevant messaging that talks to that industry problem, market problem, company problem, role problem. And none of that is about, like, here's how our product works. And
Right.
I remember I worked in an outsourced go-to-market agency. So we had like SDRs, inside sales, account execs, the whole demand gen piece. And we would work with large companies, typically 100 million plus turnover, but a lot of them were like the biggest blue chip clients in the world. And we worked with 90% of them. And the bigger the company, the bigger the training deck. So we would, let's say, win a campaign for, like, say, one of the big blue chip networking companies. And they're like, we're going to do a boot camp day. And then what they would do is they would bring down some people. And it was very rarely the CRO or VP sales. It was probably the product marketing person. It was definitely the marketing person who was probably owning that program, and maybe like one person from sales. And they would bring up a slide deck, and you just saw these like lovely young SDRs from all around Europe, like walking into this room, like really excited, prepared to go and like learn about this campaign and meet their new client. And the slide deck pops up, and it's like one of 97. And it's literally like showing screenshots of how the solution looks. And then we had to try and take all of that and then try and turn that into, well, what's the actual approach? What's the battle card? Like doing role plays, doing like practice, to try and turn all of that stuff into like a super sharp intro, some great questions to then get them into a business conversation. But we had to do all of that translation. So we were like thinking intrapreneurially about this big corporate, because the way that they communicate to the market is, look at our product, look what it does, here's the screenshots, here's all this stuff. It doesn't talk to humans. How much do you see that differentiation between the way that startups and startup leaders and sales leaders like you think about people and about business and about sales, versus companies who become so big and so complicated and they do so much that they really struggle to then translate that back into the very practical process of trying to speak to someone who doesn't know you?
I think this is a human problem and a human challenge, because I work with so many companies, and we start up and it's like, we start working together, and it's like, okay, show me how you're selling. And they do just the same thing. They pull up a deck I had one customer pull up a deck that was 77 slides. And I just said, you're meeting with people for an hour. And so you want to hit every slide. It's about 30, 40 seconds you have to talk to every one of those slides, if that's what you're wanting to do. And what the problem is that humans feel like, oh, if I tell them everything I know, then that builds credibility and authority. I show them all this information. This guy must be smart. I'm just going to trust him. People don't want to know that. They want to know that they are understood. And to understand someone, you've got to get very, very specific. So when I go into a situation like that, usually that's the first thing that goes. It's not about showing all the features and function, which from a technical founder's perspective is really freaking cool. Like, look at all I built and look at how well I know all these, everything that you could possibly come up with, I've thought about, and I've got a solution to this. And what you have to do is really get uncomfortably specific with the person. And so that's why discovery is so important, to really understand who this person is, what their problems are that they care about, not like what the marketing buzz is and what companies in general, but this person, what they care about. Now, when I go into a demo or proposal process, I'm only talking about those things. I know we have all this other functionality, but what that does is that when you talk about everything, they don't remember anything, right? They get nothing from it. But when you talk about the 2 or 3 things that they really care about, they feel understood, and then they're ready to take action. So that is just, and I think this is true. It's this idea that whatever you want to share or propose or share through like writing, it's get it out. But then if you have 90 slides, how can I do this in 10? Go through that process and then that's going to make it more impactful, because someone that is a master of their craft, right, doesn't mean that they can talk at this high complex level. It means they can explain it to a 5th grader and they'll understand it, right? And you don't do that with overwhelming them, because when they're overwhelmed, things become vague, and what happens in vagueness stays in vagueness.
That's a great line. What happens in vagueness stays in vagueness. I love that. Because you look at these websites, right, for the bigger corporate businesses, and you haven't got a clue what it means. I heard someone earlier using ChatGPT for a use case, which was taking like these very complicated websites, putting it into ChatGPT and saying, explain this to me like I was a 5th grader.
Right.
And it's true, right? You have to put it into those terms.
That's how you're going to connect with more people.
Yeah.
Right. Because they're at that level, they will understand it, and then they'll start making the connections for themselves. Yeah. But if you're just overwhelming them with feature functions and data, they don't have the brain space to absorb all that, digest it, and make the connections.
Yeah, I love that. So in terms of wrapping up here then, Shane, what I would love to do is, I think this has been like a bit of it's like going inside the mind of an intrapreneurial sales leader. And I'm just wondering if there are founders watching this today and they're going, look, we know we've got a great product. Like, we know we've got some real opportunity here to go and grow this, but we know we just don't have someone who thinks like you do inside our business. What would be some of the things that you would recommend that they should be thinking about to be able to attract someone like you into their business?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a couple things that I start thinking about, and that's one, when you're looking for that first sales leader, you don't have to know all the answers. First, seek out someone that you trust that can be a mentor or a guide, whether that's hiring them as a fractional consultant to help sort of build that process. I think that's one thing where a lot of founders miss out, is they want to just offload sales. I want to work with people that want to understand sales and they want to learn, and that I can coach them so that I can set them up for future success. And you don't have this same problem happening, 18 months after you hired your first sales leader and it's not working and you've got to go back. So I think building a culture of coaching and feedback and focus on results is key. And then what I'm looking for are those folks that are, again, they want to coach, they want to teach others in the organization. They're not about being the hero that comes in and closes every deal and says everything, but really about building a system that you can bring other people into and help them become the best version of themselves and realize their potential within the playbook that you've created. So again, first, make sure you have someone that you can trust. You don't have to have all the answers as a technical founder when it comes to sales. It's really difficult stepping into that role, because it's easy for a bad salesperson to sell themselves well, right? And what you need to be looking for are the characteristics that make you successful, right? That ambition, that curiosity, that creativity, that empathy, that eagerness to solve this problem, be something greater than themselves. And then using your resources and your network to bring in that expert that can evaluate, like record those interviews, evaluate their responses to make sure that someone that really understands this can share with you the second, third, fourth level impacts of those responses, right? And what it really means.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if that answered your question. I kind of went going in a couple different directions, but it's, looking for those people that just they have a different skill set, but the same core characteristics and values.
Yeah, love that. I always think about describing entrepreneurs. Why founders love them is because they care as much as they do, work as hard as
Yes.
they do, but bring a different set of skills into the business. I think
They
that's
are
absolutely
willing to go all
fundamental.
in. Like
Absolutely,
that's
absolutely.
it.
And they have to have that level of trust. Absolutely right. And then so you just if someone's watching this and they wanted to maybe pick your brains or they wanted to speak to you about their business, who's your ICP?
Yeah, my ICP are those founders that are that have a product that is working, that is looking to be able to sell or scale a sales organization, and those that are truly wanting to learn and be coached on the sales process. Because that's my goal, is to go in there and coach them, teach a man to fish, not give them a fish, right?
Yeah,
And it really starts whether you are a technical founder or a business founder, or you're a first-time sales leader that just needs someone that can see the forest for the trees. It's really difficult when you're in the day-to-day to not get stuck in the weeds. So that's
sure.
why that outside resource is so important. So, whether it's a small, just getting started, or it's a small team that you've hired, my job really is about coming in, making sure that we're doing the fundamentals, and we've built the foundation. We're executing on that over and over. And this is where we start to, because where founders and first-time sales leaders start to get excited is that when things work, they want to go to the next level, and they forget to go back, and you got to refortify that foundation and start over from the beginning. And that's the tedious, non-exciting part that you really have to excel in. So it's
Yeah,
people that want to build something for the long haul and not just hit this crazy target this quarter and then worry about the rest later, because you never get
yeah.
to dealing with the rest if that's your mentality.
Yeah, love that. Love that. Good man. Well, look, Shane, I've loved having you on. Absolutely love your energy. Love your genuine approach to this sort of stuff, and you genuinely care about the craft and you care about people. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing your knowledge.
Richard, really appreciate you having me, my friend.
Good man. Perfect. Everyone else, thank you so much for your time. We'll see you on the next episode.